Welcome to In the Zone with yours truly, Anthony Smith. I believe this song is appropriate for a lead in because this is Black History Month, and today we're going to talk about Toni Stone, Connie Morgan, and Mamie Johnson blaze the trail for women in the Negro Leagues. That's right. We're giving the women their love now. They deserve it. After Jackie Robinson led the exodus of talent out of the Negro Leagues and into the majors, and the fans followed, Sid Polak, owner of the Indianapolis Clowns, was desperate to resuscitate interest in his team. The Negro League had folded in 1948, and by 1953, the Clowns were one of only 4 teams left in the Negro American League. Polak, whose promotional hijinks had earned the Clowns a designation as the Harlem Globetrotters of baseball, had tried dressing King Tut in the tuxedo and employing a daffy dwarf as sideline entertainers. But in the 50s, Polak signed 3 women who had the talent to be more than simply gate attractions. The first was Toni Stone, whom Polak signed in 1953. Stone had played hardball with boys since she was a girl in St. Paul, Minnesota. By 16, she was pitching for a semi-pro team, the Twin City Colored Giants. She played with 2 more semi-pro teams, the San Francisco Sea Lions and the New Orleans Creoles, before agreeing to play second base for the Clowns and become the first woman to play in the Negro American League. The fans did turn out, and some rooted for Stone's success, but in the convention-bound 50s, not all of them were ready to embrace the idea of a woman playing on a men's team. They yelled at her from the stands, "Why don't you go home and fix your husband some biscuits?" Her husband, Aurelius Alberga, whom she had married in 1950, might have preferred that, but Stone was determined to prove herself. Polak wanted her to wear a skirt like the players in the All-American Girls Professional League. Stone said no. Much as Jackie Robinson's white teammates in Brooklyn weren't all ready to have a different colored teammate, not all of Stone's Indianapolis teammates accepted her as an equal. Some made passes at her, which she quickly rebuffed. Others tried to sabotage her play by throwing the ball to her at second base in such a way that it positioned her in the path of incoming spikes. Playing on the men's team presented challenges off the field as well. Stone had to change in the room used by the umpires. On road trips, she often stayed at brothels, a practice that began when the proprietor of the hotel where the team stayed figured she must be a prostitute. When he saw her get off the bus with 28 men and gave her directions to the nearest brothel, Stone, who could identify with the brothel workers as an outsider, was welcomed by them. Stone did not play as often as she would have liked, appearing in only about 50 of the 175 games the Clowns played in 1953. After the season, Polak sold her contract to the Kansas City Monarchs, whom Stone played with in 1954 before retiring. During her 2 years in the National American League, she had a career batting average estimated to be .243, but at one point in the 1953 season, she was batting .364, 4th in the league, right behind Ernie Banks. Legend has it she rapped a single off Satchel Paige, but the archives don't corroborate the story. Still, the persistence of those who believe the story, including Martha Ackerman, author of the Stone biography Curveball, bears testament to Stone's skills, making such a feat plausible. Determined to draw fan support of his team, Polak signed 19-year-old Connie Morgan to replace Stone. The athletic Morgan had already played 5 seasons with women's North Philadelphia Honey Drippers from her hometown, batting .338 over that period, and basketball for the Rockettes. When she read an article in the newspaper about Stone playing for the Clowns, Morgan wrote Polak to request a tryout. Oscar Charleston, the Clowns manager, and a Hall of Fame center fielder, had scouted Morgan and called her one of the most sensational female players he had ever seen. Perhaps upon his recommendation, Polak granted Morgan's request when the Clowns played an exhibition in Baltimore against the Orioles. Impressed, he signed Morgan, who had been primarily a catcher for the Honey Drippers, to play second base. She encountered many of the gender barriers that Stone had. The Baltimore Afro-American ran a photo of Morgan in her uniform alongside another of her wearing a white dress and gloves with the caption, "Miss Connie Morgan, the baseball player and the lady." The previous year, Ebony had published similar photos of Stone, one in her uniform, the other in a dress. Dressed in street clothes, Toni Stone is an attractive young lady who could be someone's secretary, but once in a uniform, she is all ball player. Yet, the Afro-Americans also recognized Morgan's unqualified baseball ability. In an account of a May game, it described how Morgan electrified over 6,000 fans when she went far to her right to make a sensational stop, flipped to shortstop Bill Holder, and started a lightning double play against the Birmingham Barons. The New York Amsterdam News validated the talents and temperament of Stone, Morgan, and Mamie Johnson, whom Polak also signed in 1954 when the Clowns played the Monarchs in a doubleheader at Yankee Stadium. The girls take a back seat to no one on the field. Morgan played just one season in the National American League, splitting time at second base with Ray Nealon batting third and posting about a .300 average. When Stone broke gender barrier all along, Morgan had the support of a female teammate in Johnson. Some accounts have Johnson barnstorming with the team in late 1953. A pitcher with a slider, a circle change, screwball, and a curveball she claimed to have learned from Page. She did not throw hard, but she had good control. They called the 5'3" or maybe 5'2" Johnson Peanut. Story has it that in her first game pitching for the Clowns, Hank Bayless peered from the batter's box to the diminutive pitcher on the mound and called, "What makes you think you can strike a batter out? Why, you aren't any larger than a peanut." She struck him out, and the nickname stuck. Good story, but newspaper accounts of her signing with the Clowns identify her already as Mamie Peanut Johnson. Like Morgan, she was an excellent all-around athlete born in South Carolina, who reportedly was the first girl at her Long Beach High School, New Jersey, to play football, basketball, and baseball. In 1953, the 18-year-old Johnson went to Washington for a tryout with the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. She and her friend, also African-American, hadn't realized that the AAG PBL remained all white. After being ignored for 15 minutes, Johnson turned to her friend and said, "We better go. I don't think we're wanted here." Johnson found a men's semi-pro team that did want her, which is where a scout for the Clowns saw her and recommended her to Polak. The men were skeptical at first about this pint-sized pitcher, but she earned their respect with her talent. After you prove yourself as to what you came there for, then you don't have any problem out of them either, she said in a 2003 interview with National Public Radio. Johnson played in 1955 with the team, but left before finishing the season, saying she wanted to spend more time with her young son. By her own account, Johnson went 33-8 during her time with the Clowns, though Negro League historians question the validity of that record. The record books are incomplete on the subject. Not disputed, though, is the fact that she was the first female pitcher in professional baseball and one of 3 courageous women to play in the Negro American League. Though Stone, Morgan, Johnson faced resistance during their playing days, the years have been kind to their memory. Stone was inducted into the International Women's Sports Hall of Fame in 1985, and St. Paul named a city baseball field after her. Morgan was inducted into the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame in 1995, and in a ceremonial Major League Baseball draft of living Negro League players in 2008, Johnson was selected by the Washington Nationals. Long after they retired, these women who challenged the way society viewed their gender have earned the respect they deserve. So I want to start this podcast off with some Black history, some that I hope you will appreciate, and I believe that these women need their applause. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do right there. I am going to take a break, and when I come back, I will come back with some more sports info for you in the zone, so don't you dare go nowhere. This is yours truly, Anthony Smith, and you are locked in the zone. Welcome back to In the Zone with yours truly, Anthony Smith. And this is definitely Black History Month, and I am going to bring out all the stops on some Black history news and sports that you may have remembered or may have forgotten. But you're going to get it all right here in the zone. Hope you enjoyed that first segment as we were looking at 3 women that paved the way and blazed some trails for African American women. And now we're looking at some news here. Black newspapers preserve Negro League's history. While growing up in Jacksonville, Florida in the 1910s and 20s, Buck O'Neill couldn't wait for Monday afternoons. That's when the bundle of newspapers would arrive in the mail, and he and his friends would congregate to read about their baseball heroes in historically Black publications such as the Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, and York Amsterdam News. My father subscribed to those weekly papers mostly so I could learn about the Negro baseball teams, O'Neill wrote in his 1996 autobiography, I Was Right on Time. When the mail arrived on Monday, all the kids were at my house, reading about Dick Lundy, who was from Jacksonville and was a great shortstop with the Baccarat Giants of Atlantic City, or legendary John Henry Lloyd, another fantastic shortstop from Palatka, Florida. Those stories of local African Americans making good jumped off the pages. They provided O'Neal and his friends with role models and gave them hope in the Jim Crow South. We'd read about these guys until we wore the paper out, O'Neal recalled. Then we go out and make believe we were Pop Lloyd, Dick Lundy until it got too dark to see the ball. In that era, long before television, widespread radio availability, and the internet, newspapers were the dominant disseminators of news and information, and baseball was the undisputed sports king. The black press played an integral role not only in boosting the collective spirits of African Americans, but also in writing the rough drafts of Negro League baseball history. The black newspaper and baseball franchise would benefit from a symbiotic relationship that grew more complex over time, particularly in the 1930s and 1940s when pioneering baseball writers Wendell Smith and Sam Lacy led the charge toward integration on and off the diamond. The Negro Leagues would not have existed without the black press. It's as simple as that, said Leslie Heffy, a Kent State University history professor and one of the nation's foremost experts on black baseball. The leagues benefited enormously from the publicity generated during a time when the mainstream white press ignored virtually anything of consequence to African Americans, and there is no doubt that the papers benefited too. The coverage of the Negro League baseball, which was a huge source of pride to their readers, sold newspapers. Larry Lester, a driving force behind the building of the Negro League's Baseball Museum in Kansas City, said the black press coverage of the Negro Leagues provided one of the few avenues of information available to black readers. Speaking of the Negro League's Baseball Museum in Kansas City, I had a chance to go this past October. Me and my wife had celebrated our 1 year wedding anniversary. Had the chance to visit that place. And I'm just going to tell you, those of you who are listening and you have yet to visit, you need to go visit. Put that on your bucket list. Go visit the Negro League's Baseball Museum in Kansas City. I promise you, you will be blown away and you will find yourself wanting to go back, just like me. And trust me, we will have the opportunity to go back. Anyway, back to the article here. The black press was the voice of the voiceless, Lester said. It was essential in getting out the message of black achievement, black accomplishments. Its coverage of the Negro Leagues in particular had a huge impact on the collective psyche of the black community, and the black baseball writers, in addition to pushing for integration, played a big part in the creation of heroes and role models, and reminding us that we weren't inferior because of the color of our skin. Lester cited columns and editorials putting black stars on equal footing with white stars. The black newspaper ran editorials saying, "Hey, Spot Pose is just as great as Ty Cobb," or "Josh Gibson is just as great as Babe Ruth," said Lester, an accomplished author whose work with the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museums Out of the Shadows project unearthed huge amounts of data about the Negro Leagues. Those comparisons to the white superstars had meaning to black readers. Every minority wants to know how it measures up to the majority. And in the estimation of the black baseball writers of those times, black baseball players measured up quite well. Interestingly, white baseball writers would never compare white major leaguers to Negro leaguers. In the 1930s and 40s, no one in the mainstream press was writing that Babe Ruth was the white Josh Gibson. Not surprisingly, white and black writers covered exhibition games between white and black teams differently. If Babe Ruth went 0-3, the white papers might write that Babe had to be under the weather, or that the white players didn't care as much about the outcome as the black players did. Lester says. Meanwhile, the black writers might celebrate just how good the pitcher who fanned Babe 3 times was. It's interesting from a historian's perspective to read the contrasting points of views. Negro League Baseball was one of the most successful minority-run businesses of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and that success resulted in several of the owners being written about almost as much as glowingly as star players like Gibson, Satchel Paige, and Cool Papa Bell. Slim newspaper budgets and once a week rather than daily publication schedules left many Negro League games unstaffed, resulting in incomplete and inaccurate statistics. But the fuzzy numbers did not prevent the black press from giving team exposure extending far beyond their hometowns. Perhaps, like Courier, Defender, and Amsterdam, news developed national circulations among black readers. With a conglomeration of hyperbole, tongue-in-cheek humor, and endless smiles, sports writers such as Fay Young, Wendell Smith, Rick Roberts, and A.D. Williams made the Negro Leaguers heroes across the nation. Author Janet Bruce wrote in her 1985 book, The Kansas City Monarchs, Champions of Black Baseball. Coverage, though, went beyond myth-making and hero worship. Injustices were regularly reported and attacked in scathing commentaries. So, too, was the push for integration, as far back as the late 1860s, when the all-black Philadelphia Pythons were denied entry into the National Association of Baseball Players. There were stories in the black press about the need for integration, columns and editorials advocating the abolishment of baseball segregation would run intermittently in the ensuing years and decades, but the big push wouldn't come until the 1940s, and it would be led by Smith and Lacy. There were others who contributed to the change, but to me, Smith and Lacy were godfathers of black sports writers, Leslie said. They were an essential part of the great experiment called Jackie Robinson. The historical impact did not go forgotten. In 1933, Smith became the first black writer to receive the J.G. Taylor Spink Award from Baseball Writers Association of America. 4 years later, Lacy would join him in Cooperstown in the museum's Scribes and Mikeman exhibit, which honors every Spink Award winner. The advocacy journalism of Smith, Lacy, and other black writers would ultimately lead to the demise of the Negro Leagues. Robinson's shattering of the color barrier with the Brooklyn Dodgers opened doors for black baseball stars to join the heretofore segregated major leagues. The loss of those outstanding ball players, coupled with scaled-back coverage of the black press by the black press, proved to be the death knell for the Negro Leagues by the mid-1950s. Instead of devoting the lion's share of their coverage to Negro League stars, Smith and Lacy were traveling with Jackie, even in 1946 when he was in the minors with the Montreal Royals. Heffy said, this trend would continue when other black stars like Roy Campanella and Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Ernie Banks joined the majors. They became the stories readers of the historically black press wanted to read about. Negro League owners found themselves in an impossible spot. They realized they couldn't argue against the integration that ultimately would put them out of business. Owners like F.A. Manley tried to bargain with the black press, F.A. said. She correctly pointed out that not every Negro leaguer was going to make the white major leagues. In fact, only a small percentage of them would. So she pled with black sports writers to keep covering the Negro leagues, to not turn their backs on them. But they were in business to sell papers, and so they turned their attention to the black players in the major leagues. Over time, many of the historically black newspapers would fold too. But their impact, like the impact of Negro Leagues, continued to be felt long after they ceased publication. Those stories provided us with a treasure trove, Lester said. So much of the history of black baseball is based on those newspaper accounts, and it becomes even more essential as more and more of the people who played in the Negro Leagues or witnessed the Negro Leagues die off. As Hefe, those newspaper accounts are the primary foundation on which Negro history is based. So, I hope that on this podcast, on this edition of In the Zone, I hope you have been blown away by some of this rich history. Like I say, some of you may have forgotten about it, and some of it you may have remembered. But to those of you who have forgotten and this has reminded you, do me one favor. Share this podcast with your friends, your loved ones, baseball purists, baseball historians, because this is some history that we cannot let die. And once again, I want to say, Happy Black History Month, because on this podcast, what I will be doing at least once a month or at least once a week after Black History Month, you will get some more moments in Black history right here on In the Zone. But right now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring everything to a close. Hope you have enjoyed this episode of In the Zone. Like I said, if you have enjoyed it, share it with others so they can enjoy it too. It's a lot of history here. Until the next time, take care of yourself and each other. God bless. I'm out.